For 5 years, I counted the days. Each sunrise felt like a scratch on the inside of my cell wall. Another tally mark carved into my skin, invisible but deep. Freedom was a word I used like a prayer, and her name was the echo that kept me from losing my mind. Lena. She'd promised to wait. She said she'd keep the house, tend the little garden I built with my hands, and write every week until the day I came home. And she did, or so I thought. Each of her letters smelled of lavender and laundry soap, like the sheets we used to fall asleep in. She always wrote the same way. Neat cursive, soft words, little pieces of hope tucked between the lines. We'll start over, Danny. You'll see. When this is behind us, everything will be new again. I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. I read those letters until the paper went soft and the edges tore. When you're locked up, words become air, and hers were the only thing that reminded me I was still someone's reason to keep breathing. Then the last month came, the one where every night felt like standing on the edge of something I couldn't name. The guards stopped calling me inmate and started calling me almost free. I packed the few things I had: a photo of Lena, the Bible my mother sent, and a small wooden carving I made out of boredom and regret. When those iron gates finally slammed behind me, the sound felt wrong. It wasn't just metal, it was finality. It was the world spitting me out after swallowing me whole. The sky looked bigger than I remembered. Too bright, too open. The air burned my lungs like I'd forgotten how to breathe. And all I could think was, home. The walk to our house took half a day. My old boots were splitting at the soles, and the duffel bag they gave me cut into my shoulder. Every step hurt, but every step also hummed with something close to joy. I could already see her face, the way she'd cry and run to me, the way her hands would shake as she touched the man she'd waited for. But when I turned onto Maple Street, something inside me went quiet. The porch light was on. It shouldn't have been. Lena always turned it off before bed. But there it was, glowing a soft yellow through the curtains. It looked warm, lived in. Then came the sound. Laughter. A man's laughter. And not just any man's. It was a voice I knew better than my own. Deep, familiar, and once trusted. Kyle. My next-door neighbor. My best friend. The guy who promised to check on Lena, to fix the gutters, to make sure she's not lonely. The kind of promise that tastes sweet until you realize it's poison. I froze on the sidewalk. My throat went dry, my chest hollowed out like someone had scooped the life from me. I could hear them inside. Lena's soft giggle, the clink of glasses, the low hum of music. I didn't need to see more. I already knew. I sat down on the bench across the street, the same one where we used to sit on summer nights, talking about everything and nothing. Back then, I dreamed about getting out, about holding her again, about the world being kind. But now, staring at that glowing window, I realized something that scared me more than prison ever had. I was freer behind bars than I was right now. Because behind bars, I had hope. And out here, I had the truth. I don't remember how long I sat there. The cold from the bench bit through my jeans, and the night pressed in like it was trying to smother me. Every time I thought I could stand up, that laugh came again. Kyle's low rumble, Lena's quick, soft reply. It was the sound of comfort. Familiarity. Something shared over time. And I realized, with a kind of slow, sick clarity, that this wasn't new. It wasn't a one-time mistake or a drunken slip. This was routine. Habit. A rhythm they'd built while I was gone, counting days in concrete. The porch creaked open, and light spilled out. I held my breath. Kyle stepped outside, shirt half-buttoned, phone glowing in his hand. He looked older, a few gray hairs, a little thicker around the middle, but still him. My friend. The guy who came to court and said he'd keep an eye on Lena. He laughed at something she said from inside, then turned to look up at the stars like a man at peace. I wanted to scream his name, to walk across that yard and remind him whose life he'd stepped into. But my legs wouldn't move. Instead, I just watched, like I was outside a movie where I didn't belong anymore. He went back in, and the door clicked shut behind him. That sound, that small, casual sound, broke something in me. Because it was the same sound my cell door made every night. The same soft click that meant, you're not getting out. I stood up slowly and looked at the house. The paint had faded since I left. The flowers in the front bed were gone, replaced by neatly trimmed hedges I'd never seen before. The wind chime she'd hung our first year together was missing too. In its place was a metal one shaped like a sailboat. Kyle used to talk about how much he loved sailing. Every inch of that place screamed that I'd been erased. I wanted to tell myself there was an explanation. Maybe he was just helping her. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But 5 years in prison teaches you to hear truth in silence. And right then, I didn't hear loneliness. I heard belonging. I walked up the path anyway. My hands trembled so bad I had to shove them into my pockets. My boots crunched over the gravel weed laid together, stone by stone. There were new ones mixed in now, smooth and white. Kyle always said the walkway needed lighter stones. When I reached the porch, I stopped. Through the window, I could see her, Lena, barefoot, hair loose, moving around the kitchen like it was still hers, like she hadn't killed something inside me without even knowing it. She poured 2 glasses of wine and leaned against the counter, smiling at Kyle as he said something that made her laugh so hard she wiped her eyes. That sound. I'd forgotten it. I wanted to knock. I wanted her to see me standing there, to see what she'd done. But some part of me, the part that survived 5 years of bars, fights, and silence, whispered, don't. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. I stepped back off the porch and crossed the street again, sitting on that same damn bench. I took out the last letter she ever sent me. It was worn, creased, almost falling apart. I miss you, Danny. Every night I lie awake and imagine the day you'll walk through that door. I'll be waiting. Always. Always. I stared at the house, at the shadows moving behind the curtains, and whispered the word out loud. Always. It didn't sound like a promise anymore. It sounded like a lie she'd told herself to make her waiting easier. The funny thing was, I didn't cry. I thought I would. But instead, I just felt empty. Like prison had drained all the tears out of me, and all that was left was something heavier. I leaned back, looked up at the night sky, and let the truth settle in. I had come home to a place that didn't exist anymore. The woman I loved had moved on. The life I dreamed of was already being lived, just not by me. And for the first time since they opened that gate, I wished I'd never walked through it. Morning found me still on that bench. My back ached, my clothes were damp from the dew, and the street was so quiet it felt like even the birds were ashamed to sing. Across the road, the house looked exactly the same, neat, alive, loved. You'd never know a ghost was sitting outside watching it. I rubbed my hands together and stared at my reflection in the window across the street. I didn't look like me anymore. Prison changes you, not just the face, but the eyes. You stop looking at people the same way. You start seeing what's underneath. And what I saw in myself that morning scared me. Not rage, not grief, just nothing. Lena used to say that people could survive anything if they had something to come back to. I'd built 5 years of sanity on that idea. And now, watching her open the curtains and let the light in, standing in our kitchen, wearing his t-shirt, I realized that everything I'd come back for was already gone. She didn't even glance outside. Maybe she'd forgotten the bench. Maybe she just didn't expect me this soon. I'd been released early on good behavior. The system's little way of saying sorry without meaning it. I thought about knocking, about walking in there and saying, "Hey, it's me. The man you said you'd wait for." But then what? She'd cry, she'd stammer, she'd say, "It's not what it looks like." And I'd look at the wine glasses, the way her hair was still damp from the shower, the faint mark of another man's hand on her hip, and know she was lying. So instead, I stood and started walking. Every step away from that house felt like tearing a page out of my own story. I passed old neighbors, faces that once smiled when they saw me. Now they looked through me like I was someone they vaguely remembered from the news. That's the thing about small towns. Your mistakes never really leave. They just fade into whispers. The old grocery store was still there, but the windows had new signs. The barber shop was gone, replaced by a vape store. Even the smell in the air was different, sweeter somehow, artificial. The world had kept moving, like I'd never existed. I wandered until my legs gave out. Ended up behind the mechanic's shop, where the dumpsters still stank of oil and rust. I used to work there before everything went wrong. The owner, old Mr. Walker, came out the back door with a rag over his shoulder. When he saw me, he stopped. "Danny." I nodded. He didn't smile. Didn't frown either. Just studied me, the way you look at a dog that might bite. "Heard you got out," he said finally. "You look better than I expected." "Guess that's something," I muttered. He hesitated, then asked, "You seen her yet?" My jaw tightened. "Yeah." He sighed, that kind of long, tired sigh that says he already knew. She tried, you know. First year, she came by here every week. Then less. After the second year, she stopped. Carl started showing up to fix things for her. You know how it goes. Yeah, I knew exactly how it goes. I thanked him and started to leave. He called after me. If you need work, Danny, I can find something for you. Might not pay much, but it's honest. I stopped, half-turned. Appreciate it, I said, though the words felt heavy in my mouth. Because what good was work when you didn't know who you were working for anymore? That night, I found myself back on that same bench, like a broken compass pointing toward the thing that destroyed it. The lights inside flickered off one by one. I wondered if she slept easy. I didn't. I sat there until the stars faded, the sun creeping over rooftops, painting the world gold. And in that light, the truth hit me harder than any prison guard's fist. I wasn't free. I was just untethered. And that's a whole different kind of sentence. The third morning, I stopped sitting on the bench. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to outrun the noise in my head. The town looked smaller than I remembered, like the years had shrunk it while I was gone. Maybe it was me who had gotten bigger, or maybe prison just taught me how to see everything in sharper lines. People stared. Some tried not to. A few nodded, that awkward half-smile people use when they don't know whether to say welcome back or stay away. My story had spread fast when it happened. The accident, the fight, the blood on the pavement. They didn't care that I hadn't meant to kill the man. They cared that someone they knew ended up dead, and that I was the one who did it. Even Lena's letters never said his name. She always wrote around it. Like skipping the word could erase the guilt. I walked past the diner where she used to work weekends. The bell above the door still jingled the same way. The smell of bacon hit me, and I almost turned in, but I couldn't stand the thought of sitting among people pretending everything was normal. Instead, I crossed to the old bridge that overlooked the river. We used to come here on summer nights, Lena and I. She'd throw pebbles into the water and tell me each one was a wish. I never told her I kept one of those stones in my pocket during my trial, rubbing it like a lucky charm. I still had it in the bag the prison gave me, smooth, flat, and useless now. The river didn't care who I was. It just kept moving. I sat on the edge, legs hanging over the side, and watched sunlight flash off the water. 5 years, that's what they took. But what I didn't realize until now was that Lena had taken the rest. She hadn't meant to, maybe, but she did. When I finally looked up, I saw her. Not Lena, but her. Across the bridge, a little girl in a yellow coat, holding her father's hand. She was maybe 6 or 7. The father lifted her up, and she laughed, that same kind of bright, innocent sound that used to come from Lena's mouth when we were young and stupid and thought love was bulletproof. For a second, I imagined that was us, me and Lena, with the life we'd talked about in every letter. A daughter named Grace. A dog. A small house that smelled like bread and lavender. It all flashed in my head so vividly that my throat closed up. Then I saw Kyle again, driving his truck across the bridge, waving at the little girl. He honked once, and she waved back, smiling. I felt the air leave me. Was she theirs? That thought hit like a fist. Maybe that was why Lena stopped writing so often. Maybe she'd built a family while I was counting time. I stayed there long after they disappeared, staring at the place where their laughter had been. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd even recognize my own life if someone handed it back to me. When I finally got up, dust clung to my jeans. The air smelled like rain. I didn't head home, because home wasn't mine anymore. I walked until my legs trembled, until the light faded, until all I could hear was my own breath echoing in the emptiness. By the time I reached the bus stop outside town, I knew 2 things for certain. I couldn't go back to that house again. And I wasn't done with Lena. Not yet. I told myself I wasn't going back, but some promises are meant to be broken. 2 nights later, I found myself standing across from that same house again, the one that used to smell like cinnamon and Sunday mornings. The curtains were drawn, but the faint glow behind them told me someone was still awake. I could see shadows moving, slow and easy, like there was no such thing as guilt in that room. I wasn't there to break anything. Not windows. Not faces. Just silence. I wanted answers. Not because they'd change what happened, but because not knowing was worse. I waited until the lights went out. Then I crossed the street and walked up to the porch. My heartbeat thudded in my ears so loud I thought it might wake the whole block. I raised my hand to knock, but before I could, the door opened. Lena stood there. She wasn't the same woman I left. Her hair was shorter, darker. The freckles on her nose were still there, but her eyes, they looked older, heavier, like life had weighed her down and she'd stopped fighting it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Danny." And that one word did more damage than 5 years in a cell. "Hey," I said, trying to sound like a man who hadn't been erased. She stared for a moment, then stepped aside. You should come in." Inside, everything smelled different. Not bad, just wrong. The air had a stranger's scent. The couch was new, the walls repainted, our wedding photo gone. In its place was a framed picture of a lake, the one Kyle used to take his boat to every summer. "I didn't know you were getting out," she said finally. "I figured," I answered. "Guess you've been busy." Her eyes darted away. "Danny, it's not." "Don't," I said. My voice cracked on it. "Please, don't say it's not what it looks like. I've heard enough lies for one lifetime." She folded her arms, like she was bracing for a storm. "It wasn't supposed to happen. Kyle helped me when I was." "When you were what? Lonely?" I laughed, bitter, sharp. "You think I wasn't lonely, Lena? You think I didn't lie awake every night picturing you sitting right here, waiting?" Tears filled her eyes, but I kept going. "I built every day around your letters. Every damn word. You wrote about hope, about home, and all that time, you were building a new one without me." "I tried," she said quietly. "I waited for as long as I could." "How long was that, exactly?" She didn't answer. Something in me gave out then. Not anger, just exhaustion. I looked around at the house, at the faint signs of another man's life layered over mine. A jacket by the door, boots that weren't mine, a mug on the counter with a logo from Kyle's shop. I stepped back toward the doorway. "You don't have to explain it," I said. "You were right to move on. I just wish you'd stopped writing when you did." She followed me to the porch. "Danny, please. It's not that simple." "It never is," I said. We stood there in silence, just breathing the same cold air, knowing it would probably be the last time. Then from inside, I heard a small voice, a girl's voice, call out, "Mom?" Lena froze. I turned slowly toward the door. The child's footsteps padded across the floor, and then she appeared. Brown hair, sleepy eyes, maybe 5 or 6. She looked at me, then at her mother. "Who's that?" Lena's lips parted, but no sound came. I didn't need an answer. I already knew. And for the second time in my life, I felt my world collapse quietly, without walls, without guards, without mercy. For a moment, no one moved. The air between us went heavy, like the whole house was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do. The little girl blinked up at me with the same cautious curiosity I used to see in Lena when she was trying to read my thoughts. Her hair fell over one eye, and she brushed it away just like Lena always did. I didn't need a DNA test. I saw it in the tilt of her head, the way her nose wrinkled when she frowned. She was mine, or she could have been. "Sweetheart," Lena whispered, voice trembling. "Go back to bed." The girl didn't move. "Is he a friend, Mommy?" My throat burned. That one word, "Mommy," hit me harder than any punch I'd ever taken. Lena's eyes darted toward me, silently begging me not to say anything. "Yeah," I said finally, my voice low. "Just an old friend." The girl smiled, shy, polite, and turned to pad back down the hall. Her tiny feet made soft thuds on the hardwood floor, a rhythm that kept echoing in my head long after she disappeared. When the door to her room closed, Lena turned back to me. Her face was pale. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." "How was I supposed to find out?" I said. "A Christmas card? A rumor at the grocery store?" She ran her hands through her hair. "Danny, please don't make this harder than it already is." I laughed, not the funny kind, but the broken kind that tastes like rust. "You think this started tonight? You think it gets harder now?" I spent 5 years replaying every moment of us, every promise, every letter. And all that time, you were raising. I couldn't finish the sentence. The words scraped my throat raw. She looked down at her hands. "You'd been gone a long time. I didn't plan for any of this. He was just there. He helped me through the worst of it." "The worst of it?" I repeated. "You mean me?" "That's not fair," she said softly. "You know it's not." I stepped closer, just enough for her to flinch. "You said you'd wait. That's all I asked. Not forever, just until I came home." Tears streaked her face, but she didn't speak. Somewhere inside the house, the little girl turned over in her bed, mumbling something in her sleep. For a heartbeat, I wanted to walk past Lena, go down that hallway, and see the child properly, see if she really had my eyes. But I knew if I did, I'd never leave. I turned for the door. Don't worry. I'm not here to take anything from you. Not her, not this. I gestured toward the life she'd built. I just needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Danny, she said, voice breaking, I wish things were different. So do I said. But wishes don't survive 5 years behind bars. I stepped off the porch and into the night. The air hit me cold and sharp, like it was trying to wash the house's smell off me. That mix of wine, soap, and a life I didn't belong to anymore. As I reached the street, I heard the door close behind me. Not a slam, just that same quiet click. The same sound that used to mean I was locked in, but now it meant I was finally shut out. I didn't look back. Couldn't. The moon hung over the roofs like a watching eye, and I walked toward nowhere, toward freedom that felt more like exile. For 5 years, I dreamed of crossing that threshold. Now I knew. Some doors, once opened, should have stayed closed. And as I disappeared down the empty street, I realized what hurt most wasn't losing her. It was losing the version of myself that still believed she was waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think I even blinked. I walked until my feet blistered and the horizon began to bleed light. The town was waking up behind me, dogs barking, cars starting, someone's radio spilling a song I used to like. Every sound scraped across me like sandpaper. By the time I reached the edge of the old industrial park, my legs gave up. I dropped onto a stack of wooden pallets behind a warehouse and just sat there, staring at nothing. My hands still smelled faintly of Lena's porch wood, that mix of rain and varnish and history. I rubbed them together until the skin burned, as if I could erase the last few hours. Freedom wasn't supposed to feel like this. When I used to dream about getting out, I pictured sunlight on my face, coffee in the morning, laughter, hers, mostly. Now it felt like the whole world had shifted while I stood still, and everyone else had found their place except me. I pulled the last of her letters from my jacket. The pages were soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. I read them all again under the gray dawn. The words that once felt like a lifeline now read like a confession she hadn't realized she was making. Kyle checks in every week. He's been a blessing. Sometimes I dream about you and wake up crying, but I tell myself you'd want me to smile. You'd be proud of me. I'm learning how to fix things around the house. Kyle says I'm getting good at it. Every line had been a warning. I just hadn't wanted to hear it. A truck rumbled past, honking once. The driver probably thought I was just some drifter. Maybe I was. Maybe that's all I'd ever be now. A man with no home, no name that mattered, and no one waiting. I walked to the nearest diner once it opened. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, poured me coffee without asking. She didn't recognize me, or if she did, she was kind enough to pretend she didn't. You passing through? She asked. Something like that. She smiled, soft but knowing. Everyone's passing through somewhere. When she left, I stared into the steam rising from my cup and thought about the little girl in the hallway. Her voice still echoed in my chest. Is he a friend, Mommy? Maybe someday she'd ask again. Maybe someday Lena would tell her the truth. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe that little girl would grow up believing her father was someone else, someone steady and safe, someone who never saw the inside of a cell. And maybe that was better. I didn't blame Lena anymore. Not really. Prison doesn't just take your years. It takes the people who used to count them for you. I thought she'd betrayed me, but maybe all she'd done was survive. And maybe Kyle, as much as it made me sick to admit, had just filled a space I left behind. By the time I finished my coffee, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going back to that bench. Not ever. I walked out of the diner, the morning sun glaring in my eyes. The road stretched ahead, long and empty, and for the first time since I'd walked out those prison gates, I didn't feel like running back. I had no plan, no destination, but I had one thing I hadn't felt in years, the quiet hum of possibility. Maybe freedom wasn't something you walked into. Maybe it was something you built again, piece by piece, after everything else had burned. So I took a deep breath, shoved the letters into the nearest trash can, and started walking toward whatever waited beyond the town limits. The world felt wide again, frightening, uncertain, and mine. The highway stretched ahead like a scar through the fields, sun bleeding orange over the horizon. I hadn't planned where to go, only that I couldn't stay. Each step away from that town felt like I was peeling off a layer of the man who once lived there, the husband, the dreamer, the fool who believed love could wait 5 years untouched. The world was bigger than I remembered. Too big. The sound of passing cars felt like waves on some faraway shore. Every now and then, a driver slowed to look at me, a man with a duffel bag and a face that didn't fit anywhere. They kept going, and I didn't blame them. After a while, I stopped walking and sat in the dry grass at the side of the road. The wind smelled of wheat and dust. I tilted my head back, letting the sun hit my face. It had been a long time since I'd felt it without a wall or a bar between us. In prison, I used to close my eyes and picture this exact feeling, freedom as warmth, not as ache. But now it was both. The ache was the price of remembering. I thought about Lena again, about the way her voice cracked when she saw me. There'd been love there, buried deep under guilt and years, but love alone doesn't keep people whole. Maybe she'd loved me as much as she could. Maybe that had to be enough. And the little girl. I could still see her small face peeking through the dark hallway, that half smile before she disappeared. Part of me wanted to turn back, to demand answers, to claim what was mine. But I knew that if I did, I'd ruin her life before she ever knew who I was. Letting go wasn't weakness anymore. It was mercy. By noon, I reached the bus stop at the edge of the next town. The sign was old, rusted, letters barely legible. A man sat on the bench beside me, a worn backpack at his feet. He nodded, that quiet acknowledgement of two lost souls recognizing each other. "Where you headed?" he asked. "Don't know yet," I said. "Someplace quiet." He chuckled. "Ain't no quiet places left, brother. Just different kinds of noise." The bus arrived in a swirl of dust and diesel. I climbed aboard, found a seat by the window, and pressed my forehead against the glass. As the town faded behind me, I half expected to feel regret, but all I felt was the strange calm that comes after a long storm. Outside, the fields rolled past, endless, golden, untouched. I thought about all the men I'd met in prison, each of them counting their own days, whispering about the world outside like it was heaven. None of us understood that freedom doesn't forgive you. It just gives you the chance to forgive yourself. Somewhere between towns, I took out the last thing I owned, a small wooden carving I'd made from a scrap of cell block bedpost. It was supposed to be a bird, wings half spread. The beak was rough, the edges uneven, but it meant something. I rolled it between my fingers and then opened the window just enough to let the wind in. For a second, I hesitated, then I tossed it out. It spun once in the sunlight, caught the wind, and vanished. That was it. The last piece of the man who went to prison for a mistake, who believed a woman's letters could keep him whole. I didn't know who I'd become next, or where I was headed, but as the bus carried me farther from everything I'd lost, I finally understood something simple and true. Freedom wasn't waiting for me on the other side of those gates. It was waiting here, in the letting go. And when I looked out the window one last time, the sky didn't look so far away anymore.